The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was the ceiling, white acoustic tiles and a single fluorescent light directly above my head. The second thing was the sound of a monitor, steady and mechanical, counting out time beside me. The third thing, when I finally reached for my phone from the bedside table with a hand that felt too heavy to lift, was an RBC fraud alert telling me my visa had been charged $24,340 by Sunwing Vacations while I had been unconscious after a car accident on the Deerfoot. I called my husband immediately. He answered on the second ring, his voice completely calm. "Hey," he said. "I'm at a work conference in Vancouver. You're in good hands. I'll be home in a couple of days." Before I could say a single word about the charge, the line went quiet. He'd ended the call. My hands were shaking as I opened the banking app. The Sunwing charge wasn't alone. There were booking fees, travel insurance add-ons, excursion deposits, and a charge from a luggage shop at Calgary International Airport. The timestamps on the transactions told a story I couldn't yet bring myself to accept. The first charge had gone through at 11:47 a.m. I had been brought into emergency surgery for internal bleeding at 11:22 a.m. I was unconscious. I had been unconscious when someone used my card to book a vacation. I opened Instagram next and my stomach dropped. My sister-in-law had posted a photo the night before. She was standing in front of a turquoise pool at what was clearly a Mexican resort, holding a frozen drink with an umbrella in it. Behind her I could see my mother-in-law, my husband's cousin, and two other relatives whose names I had always struggled to remember at family dinners. Everyone looked deeply, radiantly happy. My husband had been tagged in that photo, and in the one after it, and in the one after that. A group shot at a beachfront table covered in plates of food, 10 people laughing at something I would never hear the punchline to. He wasn't at a conference in Vancouver. He was in Cancun. I put my phone face down on the blanket and stared at the ceiling for a long time. A nurse came in to check my IV line and asked how I was feeling. I told her I was fine. That felt like the biggest lie I had ever told, and I have told some significant ones in my life, mostly to myself, mostly about this marriage. When she left, I called him back. He didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third attempt he picked up but sounded irritated, like I had interrupted something important. "I saw the photos," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You're in Cancun. You told me you were in Vancouver." He exhaled slowly. "Okay. Yes, we're in Cancun. The trip was already booked months ago and we'd lose everything if we canceled last minute. You're in the hospital. We fly back Thursday. There was nothing any of us could actually do for you from here." I asked him about the credit card charge. "Our account was short," he said. "I knew you'd want the family to go. You've always been generous like that." "I was in surgery when that charge went through." "I know," he said, "but I knew you'd say yes if you could. I'll pay you back." Then he ended the call again. I lay there in the ICU at Foothills Medical Center, while the January wind pressed itself against the window outside, and I tried to understand what had just happened. The roads had been glazed over that morning. Black ice, the kind that forms overnight when the temperature drops to -28, and then a light snow coats it just enough to make it invisible. I had been driving to work. A pickup truck had run a red light and hit the driver's side of my car. Witnesses told the paramedics I had been unconscious before they even arrived. I had been fighting for my life, while my husband packed my wallet into his carry-on. I called my sister-in-law next. She answered almost immediately, and I could hear music in the background, something tropical and bright. "I need to ask you about the credit card," I said. Her tone shifted, but only slightly. She didn't sound embarrassed. She sounded mildly inconvenienced. "Look, everything was already arranged. My brother said you two had talked about it. He said I'd want the family to go. I was in surgery when the charge went through." "You're going to be okay though," she said. "Everyone's praying for you. When we get back, we'll come straight to the hospital." "Did you know about the charge before you left?" A pause, not long enough to be guilt, just long enough to be calculation. "My brother handles your finances. That's between you two." She hung up before I could respond. I called my mother-in-law. She was quieter, but her answer was essentially the same. The trip had been planned for months. The family needed this break. My husband was worried sick about me. Truly he was, and sitting at home wasn't going to help me recover any faster. She hoped I'd feel better soon. She did not ask what surgery I'd had. She did not ask whether I had been frightened. She did not ask if anyone was with me. I tried my husband's cousin, the one who always called me sis at family dinners. He laughed when I brought up the credit card. Come on, he said. It was already paid. What were we supposed to do, not go? I had no answer for that. I'm not sure there is one. Over the next 2 days, I called everyone who had appeared in those photos. Some answered, most didn't. The ones who picked up said variations of the same thing. The trip was booked, the money was already spent, what was done, and I should focus on getting better. One of my husband's aunts told me I was lucky to have such a devoted family. I should stop making things difficult. Not one person asked how I was recovering. Not one person asked whether anyone was sitting with me. Not one person said the word sorry. The nurses at Foothills were the ones who came every hour. My primary care nurse brought me an extra blanket on the second night without being asked. Another sat beside me during her break on the afternoon of the third day because she had noticed I'd been staring at the wall for over an hour. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat there quietly, like she understood that sometimes what a person needs most is for someone to simply stay. I thought about that long after she left, about how 2 strangers in scrubs had given me more human decency in 3 days than the people I shared a last name with. My phone kept filling up. My sister-in-law posted a video of a sunset boat tour. My mother-in-law shared a photo from a market, her arms full of embroidered cloth bags. Someone uploaded a group shot from the last night, everyone dressed up, everyone glowing, the kind of photograph families frame and hang in hallways. Every image was another reminder that every meal, every excursion, every upgrade and cocktail and souvenir had come from my visa. My husband texted once to ask where I kept the password for the property tax account because a payment was coming due. I didn't answer. My sister-in-law texted to ask if I still had the receipt for a carry-on I'd bought last spring because she wanted the same one for an upcoming trip. I put the phone face down on the blanket and watched the sky outside go from gray to dark and then to gray again. On the 4th evening, a colleague from the dental clinic called. She was the first person outside the hospital to ask how I was really doing, and when I told her all of it, she went quiet for a moment. Then she said simply, "That is not okay. That is not even close to okay." I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to just say the plain truth until the tears came and wouldn't stop. She offered to visit the following afternoon. She brought a container of homemade soup and a large Tim's from the lobby kiosk because, she said, hospital food was no way to recover from anything. I thought about the specific ordinary kindness of that cup of coffee for a long time afterward. I was still thinking about it when my husband walked through the door on the 5th day. He was wearing a resort t-shirt, the kind you buy at the gift shop on your last morning because you forgot to pick up something for yourself. It had a cartoon sun printed across the chest and the resort name in yellow letters. He carried a Sunwing branded tote bag over one shoulder and had sunglasses pushed up on his head. His skin was darker from 5 days in the Mexican sun. "Hey," he said, with the easy smile of someone returning from a long weekend. "You're looking better." He set the tote bag on the end of my bed and pulled out a small item wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a refrigerator magnet shaped like a toucan, the kind sold in airport gift shops for $8. It had Cancun written across the bottom in blue glitter letters. He waited for me to react. "Did you buy this with my credit card?" I asked. He shifted slightly. "It's the thought that counts." My sister-in-law arrived 10 minutes later with my mother-in-law and the cousin. They brought latex balloons from the hospital gift shop downstairs and a box of Laura Secord chocolates. They filled the room with noise, talking over each other about the highlights of the trip. The all-night beach party on the last evening, the turbulence on the flight home somewhere over the Gulf, a funny moment when the cousin had ordered something from the menu he didn't recognize, and it turned out to be octopus. No one said they were sorry, no one asked about my recovery. My mother-in-law patted my hand once and told me I had good color in my face. They stayed 40 minutes. When the others left, my husband stayed behind. He sat in the chair beside the bed and scrolled through his camera roll, offering to show me photos. "You would have loved the resort," he said. "The food was unreal. They had 3 pools." He told a story about how the cousin had slipped on a wet pool deck after too many drinks and everyone had laughed. He laughed again telling it now. I watched him laugh. Something went very still inside me. He must have taken my silence for forgiveness, or at least the beginning of it, because he looked relieved when he finally stood to leave. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll talk when you're home." After he left, I sat with the magnet in my hand for a while. Then I placed it in the bin beside the bed. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. Anger had been burning through me for 4 days straight, and somewhere in that 40 minutes of balloon strings and resort stories, it had simply gone out. What replaced it was something slower and more deliberate. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I just needed to be discharged first. I was released on the 6th day. My colleague picked me up because when I had texted my husband to let him know the discharge time, he had responded 40 minutes later, saying he had a meeting he couldn't move. Once I was home, I did not rest. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my printed bank statements and started building a record of everything. I downloaded every transaction from the past 3 months and went through each line, highlighting in yellow every charge that had been made while I was hospitalized. Then I requested copies of my medical records from Alberta Health Services. Within 2 days, I had the complete timeline: the ambulance call at 11:04 a.m., surgery beginning at 11:22 a.m., the first credit card charge at 11:47 a.m. 25 minutes. That was the gap between me going under general anesthetic and someone using my card to book a vacation package. The Sunwing charges totaled $24,340. There were also additional charges from the resort for room upgrades, a spa afternoon, and a private catamaran excursion that added another $3,100. I saved every receipt, every confirmation email, every timestamp. I organized them into a red folder and made 2 copies, which I kept in separate locations. Then I opened our Ring doorbell app. We had 2 cameras. One covered the front door. One was mounted inside, pointed at the entryway and part of the kitchen. I hadn't thought about them since before the accident. I pulled up the recordings from the morning I had been taken to hospital. There was the footage of the paramedics bringing me out on a stretcher. My husband was behind them, and I could see the shape of my overnight bag hanging off his shoulder. He had packed me a bag. At the time, lying in an ambulance, I had assumed that meant he cared. 22 minutes after the ambulance left, the camera caught him walking back inside alone. He moved to the kitchen counter, picked up my purse, opened it, and took out my wallet. He removed 2 credit cards, the Visa and the Scotiabank card, held them both briefly, then slipped the Visa into his jacket pocket and returned the Scotiabank card to my wallet. He zipped it, placed my purse exactly where he had found it, and walked toward the bedroom. He knew which card to take. He had stood in our kitchen and made a deliberate choice. I watched the clip 4 times, then I saved it in 2 separate places. There was also a transaction on the Visa at 12:34 p.m. that day, an $800 cash withdrawal from a Scotiabank ATM at Calgary International Airport. That was him taking spending money for the trip. After I had gone into emergency surgery, after he had taken my card from my purse, he had stopped at the airport ATM on the way to the departure gate, withdrawn cash from my account, and then checked in for a flight to Cancun. I called RBC the next morning. The fraud specialist I reached asked careful, methodical questions. She cross-referenced the transaction timestamps against the hospital records I read to her over the phone. There was a pause. Then she said, "This is a serious matter. I'm escalating this to our fraud investigation team and placing a flag on the account immediately." 2 days later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office in Beltline with every document organized in the red folder. She read through everything slowly, pausing over the Ring footage, the ATM timestamp, the text messages I had received during my hospital stay, the one about the property tax password, the one about the carry-on receipt. "You've been very thorough," she said. I had time, I told her. She advised me to continue gathering evidence quietly and not to alert my husband that anything was in motion. I was good at that by then. At home, nothing changed on the surface. My husband watched television in the evenings. He made coffee in the mornings. He occasionally mentioned a spring trip he thought we might take with his family. Whistler, he'd been thinking, or maybe Quebec City. He spoke about it the way a man speaks about something he genuinely believes is still available to him. I listened and said nothing useful. Then on a Wednesday morning, RBC moved on the accounts. His card was declined at a gas station on Macleod Trail. He called me within minutes, and his voice had the particular pitch of someone who has never genuinely feared consequences and has just encountered one for the first time. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I reported unauthorized charges," I said. He said I had embarrassed him. He said I had no right. He said we were married and everything was shared, and I was making a massive deal out of nothing. Then he hung up. My sister-in-law called 20 minutes later. Someone from Sunwing's fraud department had contacted her asking who had authorized the vacation package. She sounded nothing like the woman who had stood at a poolside bar in those photos. "You need to fix this," she said. "I can't stop an investigation," I told her. "We didn't do anything wrong." "I was in surgery," I said. "The charge went through 25 minutes after they opened me up." The line went dead. Over the next 48 hours, the family group chat descended into chaos. I know this because my husband left his phone unlocked on the counter, and a string of notifications scrolled past while I was making tea. Accusations in every direction. His cousin saying he'd only gone because my husband had promised everything was sorted. My mother-in-law saying she'd assumed the finances were handled. My sister-in-law saying she'd trusted her brother. My husband's responses becoming increasingly defensive, increasingly isolated. The family that had stood together in front of that turquoise pool was now parsing whose fault this was, and how much of it they could put somewhere else. My lawyer called that evening with something the investigators had pulled from message records. A series of texts from the night of my accident. In the first, my husband told his sister that I had been taken to hospital and surgery was expected. She replied, "Okay, should we still leave?" He replied, "Yes. She'll be out in a few hours. By the time she's awake, we'll already be at the airport." His cousin had written, "Are we sure this is okay?" My husband had replied, "It's fine. I'll sort it out when we get back." There it was. He had read a message telling him I was going into emergency surgery, and his next action had been to confirm the vacation was still on. It was not a moment of panic. It was not confusion. It was a decision, made in full possession of the facts, that the trip mattered more than the person who was paying for it. I have thought about that exchange many times since. I used to get angry reading it. Now it just gives me the quiet, hollow clarity of finally understanding something I had been half choosing not to see for years. The divorce proceedings in Alberta moved more slowly than the fraud investigation. There were hearings and filings, and one long afternoon in a mediator's office where my husband argued that as spouses, shared finances meant he had always had access to my accounts, and therefore to the card. His lawyer presented this carefully. My lawyer presented the Ring camera footage, the ATM withdrawal timestamp, the surgical record, the messages. The judge noted that access to a card and authorization to use a card are distinct things under the law. She noted the timing of the first charge relative to the documented start of my surgery. She noted that no reasonable interpretation of marital shared finances extended to charging emergency expenses against a single account while the cardholder was under general anesthetic and physically incapable of consent. My husband was ordered to repay the full amount with interest. Several family members connected to specific excursion charges were included in the repayment assessment. RBC reversed the fraudulent transactions. The cash withdrawal added separate complications that resolved in ways I will leave at that. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in late April. I walked out of the courthouse on 9th Avenue with a folder under my arm, and the feeling of someone who has been holding their breath for 6 months and has finally exhaled all the way. I moved into a condo in Inglewood about 3 weeks later. I put a new couch in the living room, a print I'd always liked above it, and real curtains on the bedroom windows. I cooked dinner the first night and ate it at a table that belonged only to me. My colleague came by on the weekend with a bottle of wine, and we sat on the balcony in the late spring cold with blankets over our knees, and she said, "I'm proud of you." I hadn't known how much I needed to hear that until just then. Sometimes I think about the fraud alert I woke up to in the ICU. At the time it felt like the end of something I had believed in. Now, it reads more like a receipt, proof of exactly who I had been sharing my life with, delivered in a format that was impossible to misread or explain away. The accident broke 2 of my ribs and bruised my spleen. I healed from both of those. It took longer to heal from knowing that while I was being wheeled into an operating room, the person who should have been sitting in a waiting area down the hall was 40,000 feet in the air, ordering a second drink, planning what stories he would tell me when he got back. But I healed from that too. I am still healing from it, in the way you keep healing from things long after anyone expects you still to be. And the life I am building now, the one that is quiet in the right way, where no one takes from me without asking, where I do not have to ration my own trust, that life is mine. Every corner of it. I did not lose it when I lost the marriage. I found it, the way you sometimes find things you didn't know you were looking for, in the last place you expected to have to look.